In this video, we are going to build and deploy this modern portfolio website using Next.js, ShadCN, FramerMotion, and Tailwind. We're going to start from absolute scratch, and I will be explaining every single line of code along the way. And once we finish the website, I will show you how to deploy it using Vercel. By the end of this video, you will learn how to design a modern website with Next.js, smooth-looking animations with FramerMotion, implementing a dark mode in 2 minutes using Next themes, and many other cool stuff. Now, let's get into it. To start the project, just create a new folder on your desktop and open that folder inside VS Code. Here, I have my empty folder. We're going to start by creating the Next.js app, and then we are going to add the dependencies that we are going to use. To make this project very straightforward and easy to understand, we're going to add every single component and also the dark mode from the start, and then we're going to start designing the website. Inside VS Code, open your terminal. To create a Next.js app, we're going to use npx create next app at latest. Let's paste it into the terminal and also add a dot at the end. This is going to create the project in this current directory rather than creating another folder inside this current folder. Let's hit enter. Now we gotta answer a couple of questions. We're gonna use TypeScript, we're gonna use ESLint, tailwindcss. We don't want the code inside a source directory, so let's say no. We are not going to have routing in this project because we have only one page, but I believe having app router makes it easier for you to understand the folder structure. So we're going to say yes. Going to use TurboPack. We don't want to customize the imports. And let's wait until it installs the dependencies. And it is done. Here we have the project. Next, let's add ShadCN. So here is the official website of ShadCN. Let's navigate to Documents and Installation. I'm gonna select Next.js, and this is how you initialize ShadCN. ShadCN is a library where you can install the components that you're going to use, or just copy and paste the code. In our case, we're just gonna have two components, a button and a card component, so we can just use the CLI for that. Now let's copy this command and paste it inside the terminal. Gonna select New York and select natural as the base color. Gonna use CSS variables. If you have this error, don't worry about it. It's because we are using the latest version of React. Just select use force, and we have initialized ShadCN. Inside the website, let's look for a button. Here is the CLI command, npx ShadCN latest add button. Let's copy this and paste it into terminal. Again, just say use force to this question. And the second component that we are going to use is a card. Let's copy and paste this. And we have installed the two components that we're going to need. As you can see, ShadCN created this components folder, and inside here we have the button and the card that we installed. It looks like this. The button comes with different variants, such as the default, destructive, outline, secondary, ghost, link. You can also choose different size. And these are all made with Tailwind. The card as well. We have a couple of components inside the card folder. We have the normal card, the card header, card title, description, content. We are only going to be using the card and the card content. Now let's close this off. And there is only 3 packages left to install. Let's use npm install to install FramerMotion. Next, themes for the dark mode, and for the icons we're gonna use React icons. Let's hit enter. Let's run the development server using npm run dev. Click on the localhost link, and here we have the next project. Now we can start to create the project. We're gonna leave this running Let's minimize the terminal. We are going to work inside the app directory. This is basically the root directory. We can create pages and change the layout. Other than that, we have the components folder here. If you need to create any new components, we're going to create them inside this folder. Now we're going to start by working on this layout. Let's quickly delete this icon as well. We're not going to need it. Inside the public, we can delete all of these SVGs. Let's go inside the layout. You can almost think of this file as a traditional index.html file. This component's root layout returns this HTML and the body, and the children here basically represents every element that we are going to create inside this body. So there are two things that we need to do inside here. We're going to change the font, and we are going to enable the dark mode. First, let's delete this Geist font. You will use Inter, so let's use Inter from Next Font Google. This fonts package is already installed in Next.js, so we don't have to install it. Let's delete this two variables for the font and create a variable for Inter. It is going to be an object, so open a set of curly braces. We also need to define subsets, which is going to be Latin. And now we can delete this and change this with Inter. And it is not going to be a variable, it is going to be a class name. Also, to get rid of any hydration errors, let's use suppress hydration warning. You can also change the title and description of this website as well. Let's change this to portfolio website made with Next.js. Next, we are going to wrap the elements of this web page between a theme provider. Theme provider comes from the Next themes package that we installed. So instead of writing the code ourselves for the dark mode, this is going to make everything much more easier. Let's move the children elements inside this theme provider. So a theme provider is basically a wrapper component that comes with a couple of very useful properties. First, let's set the attribute to class, because we are going to be using Tailwind classes to define the dark mode. And one of these really useful properties is enable system, which basically detects the user's default system theme. So let's say I'm using Windows and my default theme on my system is set to dark. We can automatically detect that, and when that user visits this web page, we're going to set the theme of the website to dark automatically, depending on the user's system choice. Now that we have enabled it, we can set the default theme to system, and if I hover over it, you can see whether to switch between dark and light themes based on prefers color scheme. If enabled system is false, default theme is light, and that was all we need. We can close layout.tsx now. Now let's clean the project up a little bit. We're not going to delete anything from the globals. We are done with the layout.tsx as well. Inside the page.tsx, now we can clean this up. Let's delete image from next image and clean this div entirely. And return a empty div. For this page, we're going to use client. So at the very top, we're going to say use client, and this will make this component a client-side component. So before we start to design the website, there is only one more thing we need to do. Inside the components folder, we're going to create a component for the dark mode, which is going to be theme toggle.tsx. And this one is going to use client as well. And this component is basically going to return a button that is going to change the theme. Let's create a export function called theme toggle. To be able to switch themes, we're going to use this React component from Next Themes. The syntax is pretty similar to normal React hooks, such as use state, but instead of using an array, we're going to use an object. I'm going to say theme set theme. I'm going to set it to use theme. make sure you import it at the top like this, and let's return a button. This button is going to come from this components folder. This is the button that we installed using ShadCN. Let's select a variant. Let's choose ghost. Size is going to be icon. And let's make it circular, so rounded full. And on click, we're going to call this setThemeSetter function. And we're going to set the theme. So if the theme is light, then it is going to say dark. Otherwise, if it's not light, it is going to say light. Inside the button, we're going to have two icons, and we have already installed the React icons library, so we can easily import FA sun and FA moon. Let's style the icons as well. It is going to be positioned absolute, height 5, width 5. We're going to have this cool little animation. We're going to start with rotate 0 and scale 100. Let's give it a transition for smooth animations. And when the theme switches to dark, you are going to rotate this 90 degrees and scale to 0. So it is not going to be visible anymore. And we're basically going to do the opposite for the other one. Set it to absolute as well. Height 5, width 5. This time we're going to set the rotate to 90 and scale to 0. So it is not going to be visible at the start. Transition for the effect. And when the theme switches to dark, we are going to rotate it back to 0. And we're going to scale it up to 100. And this is it with the toggle button. We are going to be using this button inside the header section. For now, let's close it. And finally, we can start to create the design. Let's start by creating a container. Let's make this div cover the entire page by setting it to minimum age screen. That means minimum height 100 VH. Let's make the background white. So the background will be white by default. And if the dark mode is active, I'm gonna set it to black. Text is also going to be black by default. And when the theme is dark, I'm gonna set the text to white. Transition colors. Let's set the transition duration to 300. Inside, we're gonna have another container for the components that we are going to create. Inside, let's create another div. Let's set the margin left and right auto. And maximum width of this container to X large, which is 36 rem. Padding on the X-axis is going to be 4. So padding left and right 1 rem. And padding Y 20. So padding top and bottom 5 rem. Inside this div, now we can start to create the sections, and we're gonna start by creating the header. Let's use HTML semantics. So header, it is going to be a flex container. Center the items on the horizontal line, and we're gonna set justify between to put all the available space between the elements that we are going to create, which are only going to be 2. The first element is going to be the profile image, and the second one is going to be dark mode button. Let's give it margin bottom 12. Let's create another div to wrap around the image. For the image, we're going to use the image component from Next. So let's import it from Next image. This is basically like the HTML default image tag, but it is like the optimized version. Let's give it a source for the image. We're going to use the profile image. Right now, we don't have the images that we are going to use. I will copy and paste all the images along with the profile image inside the public folder. You're going to be able to find these images in the description as well. Let's import profile picture. Let's pass it as the source. We also need to define a alt text. So profile picture. Let's give it cursor pointer. Transition for the hover effect. duration 300. And when you hover over it, it is going to be bigger. So scale 110. Let's also style this div as well with 20, height 20. We are going to make it circular, so rounded full, and overflow hidden. And right under this image, we're gonna import the theme toggle that we created for the dark mode switch. It is going to be a self-closing tag. Let's import theme toggle from components. And there is a little error. It says module has no default export. Let's head into this component. Let's say export default here. I think this is going to solve it. And as you can see, it works fine. Now, before going further, let's also make this header animated using framer motion. First, we need to import motion from framer motion. And using framer motion is really simple. We just need to turn this into a motion header. Now we can define some properties to animate this header. There are a lot of properties that are coming with motion, but I will show you the most essential ones to be able to animate a section. First, we need to define a initial position. In this case, I want this header to come from left, invisible, and then go to its default position and become visible. Let's define a initial position. So to make it invisible, we're gonna set it to opacity 0. And to bring it to the left, we are going to move it along the x-axis by 100 pixels to the left, so minus 100. The second property that we are going to use is animate. So the animation is basically what's going to happen, and we want the opacity to go from 0 to 1 and move this header along the x-axis by 100 pixels, so to 0. So let's set the opacity to 1 and x to 0. Only thing left is to define a transition, which is basically the same thing with defining a CSS transition. Let's make the duration 0.8. So here is the profile picture with the cool animation and the theme button. So if I refresh the page, as you can see, this header is coming from left to its initial position. And thanks to framer motion, it happens really smoothly. For the rest of the sections, we are going to create a main tag. Let's give it space y10. Space y is basically works like gap, but to be able to use gap, you need to turn this into a flex box. But when you use space y, you can basically use it as gap without turning this container into a flex container. Inside the main, first we're gonna have this information section, which is going to be another motion div. And we are basically going to use the same animation, but we are going to reverse it. Instead of using minus 100, we are just going to use 100. In this way, this part is going to come from left to right, and this one is going to come from right to left. Let's give this one a little space between the elements as well, so space y1. Inside this div, we're going to have a h1, a paragraph, and another paragraph. Inside this h1, you can write down your own name. Let's make it a lot bigger. Font bold. Background gradient to right. From rows 600. And it is going to be purple in the middle, so indigo 500 to sky 500. We are going to put this gradient background inside this text using background clip text, and this is going to clip the text to the background, and by making the text transparent, we can create a gradient text effect. Also, it is going to be a inline block level element. Inside the paragraph, you can write down your job title. Let's make this one text gray 600, and when we switch to dark theme, it is going to be gray 400. Let's copy and paste this for the other one as well. And you can write down your address for this paragraph. Let's see how it looks. And it looks right. It's coming from the right. So right under this motion div, still inside the main, you're gonna have another motion div. Let's copy and paste this animation. This time we are going to change the distance from 100 to 50. And we're gonna make this div a flex container with item center and gap 3. Inside we're gonna use a button that comes from ShadCN. So let's import that. As you can see, my VS Code automatically imports it. Make sure you import it at the top. This button is gonna say resume. Let's give it rounded corners, a background gradient to right, from rows 400 to indigo 600. And let's make the text white. Transition transform for the hover effect, and when you hover over it, gonna make it just a little bit bigger. Under this button, we're gonna have these social media links. We're gonna have 4 icons, and we're gonna put them inside a link component. Again, this is gonna come from Next, so make sure you import it at the top from Next link. For now, let's set the href to a hashtag. This first one is gonna have the GitHub icon. Let's import it from React icons. Let's set it to width 6, height 6, and style this link as well. Text gray 600, and for the dark theme, it is going to be 400. When you hover over it, gonna make it black, and when it's dark, and when you hover over it, gonna make it white, and transition for the hover effects. And we can copy and paste this for the other ones as well. We're gonna have 3 more. So the second one is gonna be LinkedIn. Third one is going to be Twitter. And the final one is going to be YouTube. And it looks like this now. We can actually change the color of this button from rows 400 to 600 maybe. This will make the text easier to read. And this is how it looks. If we change the theme, the icons change color as well. So this was one section inside this main. So let's wrap it between a section and put some space between the elements. Let's move this entire motion div inside this section. And now the spacing looks better. So let's create another motion div between these links and this first section. Let's copy and paste the animation. This time we are going to change the initial position from 100 to -100. So this one is going to come from left. Let's also give this one a space Y of 3. Inside we're going to have a H2. Let's make this one a little bit bigger and set the font to semi-bold. Right under this, we're going to have 2 paragraphs, and of course you can change all of this information with your own information. Gonna make this one gray 600, small text. Text is going to be 400, and maximum width is going to be 2x large. So since you are going to change this with your own information, I will just copy and paste this text. Let's copy and paste this styling for the second paragraph as well. I will just copy and paste this text as well. Let's see how it looks. If I refresh the page, as you can see, all of these sections are coming from a opposite direction, and it looks really cool. Now we can move on to the next part, which is the experience section. So right under this section, still inside the main, we're going to create another section, and this time we are going to animate this entire section. Let's turn it into motion section. I will copy and paste the same animation again, but this time it is not going to come from left or right. We're going to change the direction from X to Y, and it is going to be 100. And with this initial position change, the section is going to come from bottom to the top. The opacity change will be same. Let's give it some space as well. So inside the section, you're going to have this header that says experience. Let's make it a lot bigger. Font semi-bold. Background gradient to right. From rows 600 via indigo 500 to sky 500. Gonna create the same background text gradient, so background clip text, text transparent, and it is going to be a inline block element. Under this h2, we are basically going to have these cards, and we're gonna put these cards inside a div. Let's put some space between them. Let's create a flex container inside and center the items, and use justify between to put horizontal space between them. Under this div, we're gonna have a information paragraph. Let's make the text gray 600, and for the dark theme, gonna make it 400 and small. And I'm gonna copy and paste this text information. This first one is just gonna have some information about the experience. Let's create another div and put some space between the text inside. You're gonna have 3 paragraphs. First one for the date. Let's make it small. And 400 for the dark. The second one is going to be for the title. Let's set the font to medium. And the final one is going to be company name. Let's make this one blue. And for the dark theme, I'm gonna make it slightly lighter. Now this was one card. You can copy and paste this according to your experience. In this case, let's copy and paste it 3 more times. Let's see how it looks. And this section comes from bottom to the top, just like we wanted. Now we can move on to the next part. So right after this motion section, still inside the main, we're gonna create another motion section. And we are going to copy and paste the same animation. We are not going to change anything with this one. We want this to be the same with the one before. So inside, we're going to have the same header. So we can copy and paste it here. Say education. Let's create a card with space wide 2. And create a flex container with item center and justify between. Inside, we're going to have another div with space y1. And we're going to use 3 paragraphs again. First one is going to be the date. Let's make this smaller. Gray 600 and gray 400. Let's make this font medium. And this one blue. For the dark theme, I'm gonna make it slightly lighter. We're gonna have another paragraph with text gray 600. And I'm gonna copy and paste this information. Again, you should customize this part into your liking. Let's copy and paste this card a couple of times. And this is how the education section looks. Looks like we gotta put some more space between them. Let's go back to the container and add space y8. And now this is how it looks. Now we can move on to the next part, which is the project section. So right under this motion section, I'm gonna create another section, which is also going to be a motion section. And again, we are going to use the same animation. So let's just copy and paste this. The title is going to be the same as well. Let's change this to projects. So we're gonna have 6 cards, and we're gonna use the card component that we downloaded from ShadCN, and we're gonna put them inside a grid. For the smaller screens, we're just gonna have 1 column, and for the screens that are bigger than medium, we're gonna have 3 columns, and gap is going to be 3. Inside, let's import the card from components UI. So background gray 50, and for the dark theme is going to be zinc 900. Border is going to be gray 200, and for the dark, gonna make it zinc 800. Let's create a transition transform for the hover effect, duration 300, and when you hover over it, gonna scale it up just a little bit, and cursor is going to be pointer, indicating that this card is clickable. Inside, we're gonna call another component from ShadCN, which is card content. And for this one, we're just gonna use a padding of 4. So padding 1 rem. For the project image, we're gonna use the image component again. Let's give it a source. To be able to use the images, we need to import them at the top. So let's import image1 from public. We're gonna have 6 images. So this is the second one, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. I believe this should be JPEG. This one as well. And here we have these 6 images. So this first one is going to be image 1. Let's define a alt text, project 1. It is going to have rounded corners and margin bottom 4. Let's make it a self-closing tag actually. So under the image, we're going to have a div, which is going to be a flex container, center the items, and justify between. So we're going to have a div and a ShadCN button. The button is going to have this arrow. Variant is going to be ghost. And size is going to be small, so icon. Inside this div, we're going to have the information about the project. So project 1. Oops, this one should be a paragraph. And you can write down some information about the project stack. Let's make this font medium. Let's make this one smaller. Gray 600 and gray 400. So this is one card, and there's a little problem. This one should be grid columns 3. And now all we need to do is to copy and paste this card and change this to image 2, project 2. And the cards are done. Let's put some space between them as well. Space Y8. And there is only one thing left. outside this div, still inside this motion section, we're gonna have this paragraph for the copyright text. Let's make it gray. Looks like we have a false import here. Let's delete this and see if everything is working fine. So when you refresh the page, you can see the animations. And this is how it looks. The animations are looking very smooth. The dark and light mode change looks pretty smooth as well. Looks like everything is in the place. Only thing left is to deploy it using Vercel. So to be able to deploy this project to Vercel, first you need to navigate to your GitHub account and create a new repository. Let's say modern portfolio Next.js. It doesn't matter if it's public or private. Create the repository. So here are the command lines to push this project into this repository. We don't have to use git init because git is already initialized when you create the next project. So let's open the console. If you say git init, it will say reinitialize because, as I said, it's already initialized. Let's use git add dot to add everything and commit these changes with the message test. And now we can follow these lines. And let's add this repository's link as the origin. Copy and paste it again. And let's push the project to the repository. And if I refresh the page, here is the project. You can see the images and everything. Now all we need to do is to head over to Vercel and log in using whichever GitHub account you just pushed this project to. So if you have a Vercel account already, click on continue with GitHub and log into Vercel. If you don't have an account, sign up using your GitHub account. So here are some of my projects that I deployed before. Click on add new and select project. If you have logged in or registered with the correct GitHub account, you will see the project that you just pushed. Here is the modern portfolio Next.js repository. Click on import. And you don't have to change anything here. Just click on deploy. This can take a couple of minutes. So when deploying the project, we have this little error over here. It's a mistake by me and it's actually a really stupid mistake. When we create this theme toggle component name starts with a lowercase t. So if you have done the same mistake as me, just change this lower t to a uppercase t like this and commit the changes again using git add dot and git commit again using a different message this time, maybe test2, and then push the changes. So once you're done with the change, click on deploy again. And as you can see, once we fix that little error, we have successfully deployed the project. Let's click on continue to dashboard. And if you click on visit, here is the website deployed on this link. Everything works fine. Every section is displayed properly. The dark and light mode is working well. So this is how we can create this modern portfolio website using Next.js, ShadCN, Framer Motion, and Tailwind. I hope you guys find it helpful and enjoyed it. Thank you for your time, and I will see you in the next video.